All right, guys, it's 6 a.m. The goats are fed. Let's go for a quick road trip to one of our local markets, about 20-minute drive from where I am situated. And I need to head out to Rochdale Markets this morning because they've got some specials on that I've just had some notifications earlier on. Yeah. Look at that. 18 cents a kilo for beautiful red or green capsicums. So wanted to get some of those as well as the pineapples as well. $1.98, I think they are each. This is where I get a lot of the bakery items that are difficult to find, ingredients, psyllium husks and different flours, etc. But I need fine semolina for the English muffins and they've moved it over with the nuts. Okay, so this is a big nuts and seeds section. So they've got a really good assortment here, which makes it a one-stop shop. So I can grab most of the items at one time. Going through towards the checkout, all of the fresh produce. Again, it's all gorgeous, and I could have videoed all of that, but I don't have a lot of time this morning. But I did need to get some of this salami, the Calabrese salami, as well as a block of the cheese that I needed. And also, I'm just going to check the dairy section. It's where we get our fresh milk as well from. So I grab a top cream heavy milk when I'm out here, and one of the fresh yogurts for the family as well for my grandson. Alrighty, then as I'm just about to head outside, so this is where we get our dairy from. They've got a big assortment of milks and dairy items as well as non-dairy items, so it's a good place to get your non-dairy. Just as I'm leaving, trays of mango, $30. Yep, one of those are in the... Okay, so we're back home. Alrighty, so here's my capsicums. I've just picked up just over 2 kilos. It's cost me 39 cents. You see why I don't grow capsicums at this time of year. It's a perfect time of year, though, to get these into the canning jars because I only have one single jar of capsicum left and I've got empty jars, and so I am going to be putting these ones to be pressure canned to use later on. I use them in everything, so it makes perfect sense to get them when they're costing next to nothing. I grabbed a bag of carrots because they were 89 cents, cheap as chips, and again, just so I've got them in the refrigerator, and what we don't need for fresh salads, etc. I can always feed to my goats or my pony as a treat. I picked up some chilies, not something I normally do, but I am in the middle of doing some chili sauces, and I've run out of all of the chilies that I have frozen. So I've just picked up them, $7.98 a kilo. That's about a quarter of the cost of chilies normally, around $40 a kilo. So that was, again, another bargain. I have my salami. These are for pizzas later on, so they're just going to get split up and put into the freezer into smaller packs. Each one of them is enough to do a pizza. So these guys were, from memory, I think they were $2.99 each. $2.98 each pack. So I can split them into half and only be spending $1.50 for each of the pizza for the salami. Okay, so that's happening with them. So that'll save me a little bit of money and give the pizzas a little bit more flavour. I've got cabana that I also got really cheaply from Rochdale Markets a few months ago, so that's frozen as well. And here's a beautiful tray of mangoes that I've brought home. So these are R2E2s, and if we were to go to Coles or Woolworths at the moment for R2E2s, we would be paying $5 per mango. All right, so I've got a tray of 12 mangoes, and they're not all fully ripened yet. And these are not overripe. These are not even fully ripened yet. That one might be edible now, but these are beautiful. I spoke to the guys at the markets. The store themselves paid $28 a tray. We paid $30 for a tray, so the stores are only making a couple of bucks. Not bad. Alrighty, and they had pallets of them, but they won't now. They'll disappear because we're all hunting mangoes around this area, and I would drive out to the big orchards, but I figured not. All right, so onto bread for the day. So I need to make my normal standard bread rolls. I'll be doing that. But I'm also making like a sourdough, but instead this one here is a fermented bread recipe. So this is a yeast starter, not a sourdough starter. So in this bowl contains 5 grams of yeast, 250 mils of water, and 125 grams of the baker's flour that I use, which is the 10.7% protein, so it's a heavy flour. Normally you would only need to have equal parts flour and water, but not with this flour. Unfortunately, you need to have extra, which is fine. You just have all of those measurements get taken off when I make my bread itself, and I'm making a big loaf because I got a new bread tin and I'm testing it out. So I figured instead of doing my standard sandwich loaf, I'm going to do a really nice big sourdough style loaf. So this has been sitting on the stove. It can be kept overnight. Should be kept overnight in the refrigerator, I should say. You do it the night before and put it in your fridge and just leave it to do its thing and slowly develop. Okay, it's not too hot yet. It is going to be a hot day today, but I figured it's still cool. It's 7 o'clock this morning now, and this has been sitting on the stove since before I left for the market. So it's only been out for an hour, and it's already lovely and active. All right, so it's doing its thing. There's no sugar in here. There's nothing, just the water, the flour, and the yeast. So I'm just going to put that aside and let it do its thing while I just prepare just my basic bread rolls, which I've shown before, so I don't need to show those, but I will show this once it's been baked and made as well. All right, on to pressure canning the capsicums. All right, so the good thing about the big trays of capsicum out at the markets, for example, the great big open pallets of them, is you can hand select them. They're not pre-bagged, so you can go through and you can pick your own, and that way you ensure you're getting really good top quality fruit and vegetables. So I've picked myself 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 of them. All right, so they just need a quick wash, and I'm just going to do that with a little bit of baking soda just to wash off any chemicals off these as well. Okay, all clean. So I have given them a good clean, and when I selected them, I aimed for fruit that were uniform. Makes it easier for cutting them and chopping them up. And I'm going to be using just my chopper machine instead of doing them all by hand. All of the tops and seeds, etc., will all be kept and used in the dehydrator later on for the paprika powder as well. And I've got my jars ready. So let's just go ahead and get all of these prepped. I will probably keep maybe one whole and keep that for adding to some of the fresh salads that are getting made at the moment, because these are so fresh themselves, they're going to last perfectly fine in the crisper in the refrigerator without any problems. So I'll probably just keep a couple aside and maybe just do 8 for the canning process. That'll give me 4 more jars to go in, because usually I can fit 2 of these style of capsicum for each pint jar. I'm not doing quarts, I'm just going to do pints, and maybe some half pints as well. But either way, they're all going to get pressure canned afterwards once they've been chopped up. I'm going to dice them, and you've seen me using the pressure canned capsicums in every different kind of recipe, whether it be into soups or back into fresh salads themselves. So I'll continue to cut all these up, and like 39 cents is all it's cost for these guys. Yeah, 39 cents. It's 39 cents. Ridiculous. Definitely saves the budget by occasionally finding some really good specials. Rochelle Market's great for doing it, but any of your local markets most likely would have specials that they would be advertising as well, just like Rochdale do, via Facebook. So I usually check the day before, and if there's something that I really need or that I've been hunting, so I have a list of items that I want that we don't grow for whichever reason. So we're not growing these because it's fruit fly season up in Queensland. Okay, so in order for me to grow this style of capsicum at this time of year, that would require either insect exclusion nettings all around them, which means they'd all have to be hand pollinated, and it also means using chemicals to keep other insects and bugs off them. Not to mention possums love capsicums, and we have grown many capsicums over the years, and we grow a capsicum here called Pop's Favourite, and Pop's Favourite looks like a chili but it has no heat, so it is a capsicum, and our family all grow Pop's chili or Pop's capsicum, and it doesn't get fruit fly. So we can still have fresh capsicums throughout the year, except they're just not these giant big bell peppers, which are gorgeous and sweet, which I use for my sauces as well. I've made enough sauce, and even if I haven't made enough sauce, putting these into a jar and canning them, I can always use them for sauce later on, or salsas or anything else. But not today's plan. Today's plan is just to get them into the jars, and so I can get on to doing the bread making. So while these are cooking on the stove, I'll be preparing the morning's bread rolls for this afternoon, and also I've got some yeast and flour fermenting as well, and I currently have my new bread tin, which is a really big one, and I have that currently being seasoned in a really hot oven. So I'm hoping to bring that out and do a sponge loaf, a white sponge loaf, instead of my normal sandwich loaf, because it's a really big tin. We'll give that a go. So that's my 39 cents worth of capsicum, minus 2 that are in the refrigerator. Just going to cut them smaller so I can put them into the dicing machine, so I'm not going to use any power by using the manual slicer, and If you want to use a food processor, go ahead. I don't use food processor, the big ones. I don't have one. Simple. I don't have one. Never needed one because the chopping machine has always been good enough to chop up the fruit and vegetables and things like that I'm using, and it doesn't cost any money, and it works when we don't have any power, which is always a bonus, especially if we're tripped over to the grid. I prefer not to be using any excess power. So we have a really hot, bright, sunny day today, which means there's plenty of power being generated by the solar system, and so I will be doing other important items like baking, using the pressure canner instead as well, and doing just simple domestic stuff like washing and that type of thing today. So it's an inside day when the temperatures are over 30 degrees, as it will be soon. So days always start early, which means we can get the animals fed, watered, all of that type of stuff. I have a dog with a terrible injury. She's inside in the air conditioning, staying cool, while I'm waiting on our vet to come to the property, which he always does, which he is fantastic. So I'm just waiting on the vet to come and give me a hand with her. We need to have a look at a wound that she has on her foot, which means she's lame at the moment, which is not good. She's a 12-year-old, coming 13-year-old Smithfields. She's been our working dog for the whole time we've been here on this property for over 12 years now, and so yeah, I need her looked at and make sure she's not in any pain. She looks a bit better today than she did last night when I got home, and found her not walking, but so she's had some treatment done overnight, and she's been given an injection. I gave her an injection of long-acting penicillin. I have all those kind of things on stock, as you do when you've got livestock. So I gave her a shot of penicillin last night, cleaned the wound and put some Sentogen on it to keep it covered and clean overnight. And she's still eating and drinking, so I'm not too concerned at the moment until we have a look and see. It looks like she's had a toenail ripped out while she's been doing some digging on the property, which has been naughty, that she's digging to stay cool. So it looks like she may have ripped off her toenail and it's gotten infected. Either that or she's got a really bad abscess on her foot. Again, the vet can have a look at that when he's here. We'll get the room prepped for that in a minute. I'll finish chopping these up. So because they're getting pressure canned, and they get pressure canned in the pint jars for 35 minutes, okay, that's to end up with these guys. All right, so this is just fresh capsicum, and you put water in them, and then debubble them and pressure can them, and then as they break down, they cook. Okay, and so this is cooked capsicum, but it is 35 minutes. So I'm going to do the larger dice, not the really fine dice when it comes to the salads. So you have a few different options. This is the size that I'm going to use to do all of these capsicums, and I have 5 pint jars. They should fit. So as I'm chopping them up, I'm just going to fill my jars and then just pack them in really well. The more you pack in, the less you end up headspace in the jar once they cook, because they will break down. So by packing them in, you end up with less airspace. It doesn't affect the shelf life. You still want to aim for the inch headspace when you're doing this as well. And remembering I'm going to be adding some water to it as well. So that gets me down to my inch headspace in my jars. And they're well packed in at the moment. All right, so I will just keep going, filling up as many jars as I need to, as I chop and fill up my container. Simple. So that's all of our jars done. I have 5 of them plus the smaller one. I used to buy canned capsicum and have it in the cupboard so that I could add it to soups. I'll let you know what a small little tiny can of capsicum costs from the duopoly when you look at this, and it's cost 40 cents minus 2 capsicums that are still in the refrigerator. So this ingredient can get used in so much. It can be used in any recipe that calls for you to be adding capsicum when you're cooking a meal, so a sauce of any kind, or if you're making soups, or if you're making, paprika. If you're adding them to salads, these are still okay to add to salads. They still have some crunch. They're not completely broken down because they've still got all their skins on them. They can also get used for marinades, etc. I use them for everything, so it's definitely something. And the only ones I've got on the shelf at the moment are my yellow ones, which are lovely. They're not, and I've got one red. This one was done in June, so that's some time ago. And that's what they look like when they've been cooked through. All right, so the capsicums break down. There is some air space in your jar. The general rule is as long as it's no more than 50%, which that's not. When you actually look at the increments on the side, it's not 50%, so it's still more than safe. And that last jar's not going to last long anyway. It'll be gone by the end of the week. And then we'll have all these new ones. All right, let's get the bread going because the day's warming up and I don't want the oven going in the heat as well. So I'm going to do a sponge starter white bread, I guess is what they're called, a starter white bread. And so it's a large loaf. Now I'll go and get my bread tin as well, but I won't need it yet because we're going to proof this. Bread tin has been baking in the oven. All right, I'll let that cool down for a bit. All right, so we've got scales. We're going to do everything by weight for this recipe. So to do this loaf, it's a big loaf. It takes 900 grams of flour to make it, so you can divide that up if you want to make a smaller loaf and not do the big one. Plus also remembering that we've taken out some flour for our starter as well. So the total amount that I actually need is 775 grams of baker's flour. So this is just our standard baker's flour that I use for everything, and 775 grams. To that I need to add some oil. You can use shortening if you wish to. Yes, this is a English recipe, but I don't use shortening, so I always use my avocado oil or coconut cream. You can substitute as well. So I need 30 grams. This helps to keep the loaf moist, as well as it helps keep the loaf from going stale. So it's not something to not add to your bread. I'd recommend adding it if you want your loaf to last more than that. And this is going to be a big loaf. You can use a bread improver as well if you wish to use that as well. And the recipe that I have is actually one of those recipes that does have it. Not many bread recipes do have the improver added. All right, yeast. We have the yeast that is already in the starter as well, 5 grams. So I only need to add 5 more grams to my bowl. And I am almost out of yeast, so I do need to get some more. So that's my 5 grams of yeast. And then we add our salt, which is 18 grams of yeast, just white salt, non-iodized salt. Here's our starter, which is going to get added. So this starter has been fermenting away room temperature for the past 3.5 hours, and it is all bubbly and smells lovely. You can do this in the refrigerator for 24 hours in the cold or overnight as well, but it's, as you can see, lovely and aerated, and this will be going into our bread mix. So as you can see all those gorgeous bubbles, that's going to help lighten up our loaf and add flavour, because that's what this is. This is the flavour bomb going into the bread to create more of an artisan style loaf, I guess, of bread versus a standard sandwich bread. This one's a little bit more savoury, so it lends itself to some different shapes if you want to do different shapes. Focaccias, ciabatta, that style of loaf. All right, so but I'm just doing a really big loaf because I need to test out my bread tin and I want to just to see how well this works. Okay, so to this bowl we need to add the leftover water. So we started off with the recipe which 560 mils. I've used 250 mils, so I need to add another 260 mils of water to the starter. So once again, I'm using my scales to make sure I get my levels even, and that way I end up with a consistent product. And also everybody who does view these videos also can see exactly what I'm doing, and there's no shortcuts being made at all. And if I'm adding anything extra in the beating process, I will let you know. All right. So that's our water that's now been added to our starter. I'll just give that a really quick mix through just to make sure it's even. You want a starter that floats just like that. Makes a raft. Okay, so that's what you're aiming for with your yeast starter, that it floats. Okay, perfect. Alrighty, into our bread mix. All of this can go. So we know what comes next. Into the mixer we go, and we're just going to start on a slow speed initially for a minute or so, just until it incorporates all those ingredients, and then we're going to increase the speed up to a medium, and we're going to do it for 5 minutes. Now, that's when I can add extra liquid if the dough isn't looking like it's taken enough liquid, because this flour that I use does take a lot. We are hydrating it with that extra starter, so I can always add liquid to it at this stage in a minute or so. If my bowl isn't clean, I'll know. And I'll show you if it looks like it needs to have any extra as well. It's quite a warm day today, so the flour may react a little bit differently to how it normally does. I don't want a really stiff, hard dough. I do want it to mix in really well together and get beyond the shaggy dough stage though, before I turn up my paddle and turn up the mixer and let it go and knead for between 5 and 10 minutes. I'll let that keep mixing. Okay, so after a minute, the dough's not coming together yet, so I'm going to add 20 mils more of water. That's all at this stage, and just see what happens after I've added just even 20 mils. So we will see, or 20 grams. I've weighed everything. Like I said, the dough reacts differently, so the recipe is variable. It will stay between 560 and 600 mils of water. All right, so that's all coming together now, moving away from the bowl. The bowl's nice and clean, so I can increase the speed and just stay with the machine for the next few minutes. This will take a good 5 minutes to beat, and then I'll check the dough, and if it's ready, I'll stop. If it's not, I'll keep going. All right, 5 minutes is up. Let's check out our dough. There we are. It's going to get proofed into its proofing container. I'm going to weigh that piece of dough for you all, just so you know how much it is. We're going to reserve some of this later, not now, but later. So 1,425 grams. So it's almost 1.5 kilos at the moment, remembering we've added water. Now, this I need to take off just 250 grams, all right? The reason for that is that we can use this as our starter next time. So we can keep this dough in the refrigerator for up to a week in a cool space. 245 grams, close enough. So I'm just going to wrap that one up and put it in the refrigerator, and that will be my starter for my next loaf of bread that I'm making in the same way. All right, now this piece of dough can now go into its container, and we'll proof it until it's more than double. I want about, I'd like to see probably at least double. We'll say at least double. It's a warm day. It'll be hard to tell how long that's going to take. All right, but this is the style of dough that we're expecting, something that's easy to handle. All right, all I'm going to do is just tension it a little bit, just like that, and just so that it rises evenly, because this is going to be the top of my loaf eventually, which is why we tension it now. I'm going to pop that into its container, and I'm just going to add a little bit of oil to the surface to make it easy to get that out later when it's ready. All right, that's the dough. We'll come back to this later. So this is going to be our bread tin that we're going to be using. We need the top for this one. So it's a large, really large. I've just been baking that in the oven at 220 degrees for about half an hour, letting it cool down. So it's the first time use for it. So I've just given it a light seasoning. It is non-stick, so hopefully it will be okay. We're about to find out. Interesting that it's got those vents in the bottom. None of my other bread tins do. So this is clearly a modern tin in comparison to my previous baking tins. Let's give this guy a go and see how it bakes up the bread once it's ready. Rightio, so it's been a couple of hours, not even that, and I've just popped back to get the capsicums out of the pressure canner. So that's how long it's been, 35 minutes. They were pressure can plus 10 either side, so 55 minutes, and look at our dough. That's a rapid rise. It's been on the windowsill, which there's no direct sun or anything on this back windowsill, so it's not exactly hot either. So I'm pretty happy with how rapidly that has risen, but I'm glad I checked it because I would have overproofed it. Let's check it to see if it's proofed. So checking to see that it springs back. Oh, it's so soft. Smells very much like sourish dough. All right, so we want to knock this out, but we don't want to knock out all the air. Does that make sense? All right, so we're just going to turn that out. We're going to be shaping this to fit into this big sandwich loaf pan. Beautiful. I only want to shape this. I don't want to do anything else. I might just move my jars because I might need a bit of space. Okay, so now I've got a bit more space. All I want to do is put a little bit of oil onto my hands. Not that it needs much, just a little bit. No added flour to this. Definitely not. I just want to create the shape. So my bread tin is, like I said, quite big. It's 13 inches. I can divide this into 2 smaller loaves if I wanted to, but I want to do 1 large loaf. So I'm just going to press it out until I get to the size of my bread tin, and that's it. And then it's time to roll. All right, because I'm doing sandwich style bread, I simply want to ensure that I have nice roll. Gives me those gorgeous layers as it does, and makes the bread nice and light and fluffy. That's it. It's going to proof again, so I'm going to leave the seam, pinch it together if you want. It's not particularly necessary because this is going to proof once more. So I'm just going to put the baby back into the tin. There's enough oil on this that there shouldn't be any problems with getting it out of this tin. Into the tin it goes. We're going to proof it again. So it's got a lid. I don't get these lids, but it's got a lid. So I guess that's for baking and continuing to keep your bread at a nice square loaf for those that don't want their breads to rise up above the tin. I mean, I don't mind my bread rising up above my tin, but I'm going to put the lid on, okay? And I was going to say I could put it in the windowsill, but I think I'll just leave it where it is. We'll come back and see what that looks like in an hour's time. So here's the capsicum that has just come straight out of the pressure canner. We'll have a closer look at that briefly. So the larger jars, as you can see, is starting to settle as they cool. When they are first out, it's not uncommon to see them with the capsicum to the surface and the liquid down below, but they will sink over time, so don't worry about that. All right, so that's our capsicum out. Like I said, 35 minutes of pressure canning, and that is my 40 cents worth of capsicum. Pretty good. All right, we'll come back when it's time to bake the bread. I'll show you it when it's proofed. I need to bring it to the height just about a couple of centimetres before the top of the baking tin, and then into the oven it's going to bake. Rightio, let's have a look. It's, like I said, this back window has no direct sun, and I didn't want to put this into the oven. It's been 45 minutes already though, which is fine. It might just take a little bit longer, but I've got a better idea. I have to put the clothes dryer on to do some washing, and the clothes dryer has a vent at the front which generates hot air out the front. So let's us make a proofing area for this guy. I know it's unconventional, but I might as well. All right, it's been within 30 minutes. Let's bring this tin up and have a look-see. Because the day is getting on and I've still got to bake this and it's still got to cool. Holy crappy. You know, negatier. Well, that clearly worked. Needed somewhere warmer. So I'm going to preheat the oven. Just going to pop the lid back on. Let's get the oven ready, which will be another 10 minutes. And then this guy can go into the oven to be baked. Now, do I bake it with the top on and just have a square loaf that everybody kind of wants to have? Or do I take the top off and let's see how big she grows? I don't know. It's hard to decide. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what the family would probably prefer. Square sandwich bread. You know what? It's got the top. Let's, for the first bake. No, so I can't. I'm going to do it with the top off. Let me preheat the oven. Right, oven's ready. I just don't want to put the top on and restrict the growth of this loaf. Alrighty, let's go. Now, same as always, I will mist the oven as soon as I open it up. It's a fan forced oven. We're at 220 degrees. I'm going to pop my loaf in towards the door, not all the way at the back where the fan is. I'm also going to mist just over the top of the crust. And that's it. Okay, I caved into family pressure. They asked me to put the top on. I already regret that decision, but it's done now. So after 25 minutes in a 220 degree oven, I turned it around halfway so that it got even cooking in an air forced oven on either side, all around, whatever, and just made sure I flipped it halfway. And in the last 10 minutes of cooking, I just removed the top because I needed to know what was going on inside. So, alrighty, let's have a look at that. I mean, it's very crusty. It's going to have a towel put over the top of it so that it doesn't end up with that really crusty top. Nobody here appreciates a crusty loafed bread, sadly. But more importantly, it'll be whether or not there's lots of, oh, gee, that just came straight out. Well, okay, that's tick for the can or the new baking tin as far as just slid straight out. So, all right. So the Pullman tins are pretty good. As far as non-stick goes, I'll just pop a cloth there because this tin is still hot. I don't want to burn the counter. Alrighty. It's evenly cooked. There's lots of bubbles. I'll bring you down. Lots and lots of bubbles in the crust. That's a side. This is the bottom. There's the seam. Lots of bubbles. Oh, gee kiss, it's hot. It's very a heavy sounding loaf. It'd be interesting to see how dense this is. Ow. Alrighty. It has to chill. Sorry, I would love to cut into it, but you don't cut into freshly baked bread. This needs to chill. But for a sandwich bread, yeah, pretty happy with. The family will be happy with that. It looks like a normal loaf of bread. Good size. Yeah, it's a good size. So it'll all come down to how it cuts up and whether I can get rid of that really crispy top, which is easy to do. Just a tea towel, fresh cloth over the top, like so, and just let it steam as it cools down, and that really crusty top will disappear without putting butter on it, apparently. My son does not like butter put on the outside of his bread, so there you go. We'll just leave that to cool down now. So for those using the Pullman tins, tell me, do you bake with the tops on always or not? I don't know anything about that. I have bought smaller tins of these that I've given to my daughter. And I don't mind proofing with the lid on, but baking with the lid on all the time, don't know. Tell me. Leave a comment. Let me know what you do with the Pullman tins before I have to go and spend some time searching. I'm not sure about those vent holes in the bottom if they're necessary. Like a good bread tin shouldn't need to have them, but we will see what this bread is like once I cut into it. Time will tell. Alrighty, it's cooled enough that I want to cut into it because the family are chomping at the bit to have something to eat. So I will chop into it. It's still warm, but it'll give us an idea how it looks. It's a decent sized loaf of bread though. Alrighty, so because they didn't wait for me to let it chill, they're going to have to deal with it being a bit crunchy. Whew. Looksy at that. All right, let's bring you closer and have a look at all of those bubbles. Look at that. Oh, there's a nice looking piece of bread. Lovely and spongy. So is this. This is the loaf. Well, you know what happens. We have to taste it. Because what's the point of making bread if it doesn't taste nice? So I've got the starter still in the refrigerator, which means I can make more of these each week and maybe do ciabattas or some of the flatbreads to go with guacamole. Let's quickly check on Hubert because it's, I think it's like the 12th of October or something today. Okay, there's been a change in Hubert. It's not looking good. That is mold. Up here, the same. So for the manufacturing company that suggested that it was safe to keep guacamole on the shelf instead of the refrigerator, they look fine. There's not a lot of change in the two from the refrigerator. This one I've been opening a few times. So this one has been exposed to air. This one has not. These are now coming on to 3 weeks old. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not there's a change in the taste or colour. There is a change of colour. So the one that I have been eating a few times has started to oxidise a little, but it's still nowhere near as much as what guacamole. Could you imagine putting guacamole in the fridge for 3 weeks and what it would look like? So, you know, it certainly hasn't changed that much, but I would say that because I keep opening this jar and creating and letting air in, even though I re-vacuum seal it, it's enough to cause oxidization of the avocado. But you know what I'm going to do? Because, you know, it doesn't look that bad. It can go on the bread, okay? Because, I mean, that's what you would have a nice artisan bread. You put some guacamole maybe on it, you know. And if you see me next week, you know that I haven't died once again. Because it still tastes amazing, which I'm sure is probably to do with the level of lime that's used to preserve this, which is why it's staying so well in the refrigerator. Unlike Hubert, who, like I said, now is starting to turn mouldy. And so he should. 33 degrees outside. It should be starting to do something, but yeah. So it's the first time I've seen, and funnily enough, it appears wherever there is an air pocket. Good to know. Don't be doing this one. That's fine. Do we let him go a bit longer? We'll see before he turns really, really bad. He still hasn't changed much colour though. Going to leave him go a little bit longer. So there you go, 20th of September this guy was made. And according to the manufacturers of the vacuum sealer, sorry, it just went blank, the vacuum sealer, with the guacamole recipe that I've used, it can be stored on a shelf in a cool, dark place, according to the American food standards. So clearly somebody is incorrect. But the Australian food standards do say store them in a refrigerator once vacuum sealed. Look how green that one is. Beautiful. This one's the same age. Again, 20th of September. So, yeah. Keeping them in the fridge? Sure. Going to be making up a large batch of guacamole and you're not going to eat it all in the same day? Sure. I recommend putting them into the refrigerator instead as a way of preserving them perhaps for a short period of time. If you were wanting to keep them for longer than a few months, because Australian Food Standards says a few months, a few meaning 2 to 3, I think they said. 2 is a pair, 3 is few. So anything longer than, you know, a few months, then perhaps look at putting it in a freezer situation. But it does say extend shelf life for a few months. That's the Australian Food Standards, all right, which I think is 3.2.2 for vacuum sealed products, which this one's about to get vacuum sealed and go back in the fridge. Oh, and see how long it takes before I wouldn't eat the guacamole that's in the refrigerator. Alrighty, because I'm eating them when it's on the toast now. So I will vacuum seal my jar once again, put it back in the refrigerator, and we'll keep an eye on the one that I continually keep opening and exposing to oxygen and doing all sorts of things to it, like eating from it. We'll see how long it lasts. Opened and resealed, because Hubert's not going to be doing much. I'll put him back in the cupboard. We'll see him next time. So that's my chatsies for the weekend, for the day. I shouldn't be doing any more. I still have all those mangoes to prepare as well, and doing all of that, and also getting this big old girl going. So this was my mum's Kenwood, which I grew up with. And this is what my mum used to make all of her baked goods with, as well as when she was making any cakes or anything like this. So this old girl has all of its equipment, except it's missing a dough hook. And I've got another Kenwood here somewhere that I'm going to dig around and see whether it's compatible. If not, I've got to find myself a very old Kenwood that I can use for parts to get a dough hook, because it's got everything but the dough hook that I can find anyway. I'm still going through some of the bakeware and cookware from Mum's place. Okay, thanks very much. Enjoy your weekend all. Bye now.